Arsenal 104FR.
Hi, Misha here, and you saw the little intro, and you read the title. Yesterday, just yesterday alone, 3 people asked me if I had one of these guns to sell. So I guess it's time to cover the Arsenal SLR104FR, why they aren't available, why it is extremely unlikely they will ever be available again, and just generally why 545x39 is a really tough cartridge to get a foreign company like Arsenal to manufacture. I did a video just over a year ago in April of 2020 about this, and did a video in 2018 about kind of the end of 545 imports. So this has been a slow but steady decline, but it makes sense because before this time 545 guns were very uncommon. It's just for a few years there it did seem like they were everywhere. And the 545 is a great gun. I mean, the 545 is a great cartridge. The 104FR is a great gun. For those who were old enough and bought one, I'm sure you're glad you did. For those who weren't old enough, I have sympathy. For me, it's a lot of the guns from the 80s I wasn't old enough to buy. And for those that kept saying mañana they could buy them, they just didn't, little less sympathy, honestly, because the deal with the imports, you need to buy them when they're around, because it was kind of evident from the get-go these would not be around forever. It really was a minor miracle the 104FR came into the country at all. This is a true blue import. It was built over in Bulgaria. It has a Bulgarian 1mm stamped receiver with the side rail as standard, folding stock with the 4.5 pin as standard. It does have the grip reinforcing plate, 16 1/4 chrome lined cold hammer forged barrel, proper 90-degree gas block with the accessory lug, proper front sight base with 24mm threads, bayonet lug, and AK-74 muzzle brake. And of course it accepted standard 30 round 545 mags. So these appeared on the market in 2013 and really became well known in 2014. But it was a long road getting a 545 Arsenal here. So let's kind of rewind a bit.
104FR.
Here we have Arsenal's SLR-105. This is the A1 variant. There are a few different variants. And this was their first 545x39 caliber gun and their first stamped gun. It wasn't actually their first attempt to do this caliber. Back around 2001, 2002, there was talk of doing a milled 545 gun. We already had the SLR-101S, which was a 760x39 import, and there was talk of doing an SLR-102 in 545. But this never really got off the drawing board. But in 2004, at the tail end of the federal assault weapons ban, the SLR-105 and SLR-105R, which would have been the same gun but with a side rail here, were announced. And these were to be the first basically mil-spec, correct spec AK-74s ever imported. Now, we did already have one previous 545 AK import. The Romanian, well, SAR-2, later Wasser-2, and before those we had the Romac-2, the Kerr-2. But those came in very small numbers compared to the 7.62x39. And they were the first, and for a very long time, only 545 imports. But we had the 105 come in, and the first versions were still band style, meaning they had no 24mm threads on the front sight base, no bayonet lug, but otherwise took standard mags and standard AKM AK-74 furniture. Although they shipped originally with polymer, it was easy enough to put this Russian wood on. And then in 2005 they issued the A1, which they did not do the accessory lug for the gas block, but they did swap out the front sight base to give you 24mm threads and a bayonet lug. So that's kind of nice. And they did this as either an A1 or an A1R or A1, whatever, with the rail. I kind of like the railless look because so many imports these days have rails. This was a very nice gun, for especially being a stamped. Nice triggers, but only a few hundred came in. Numbers we really don't know. Some people will say 200 and 200, some will say 500, 500. It doesn't matter. They were here and gone. And to be fair, back in 2005, I was the one that drug my feet and did not buy an SLR-105. I made a mistake. You know, my thing about saying buy imports, it didn't happen overnight. This is me speaking from experience, guys. 104FR.
Helps if I don't have the safety on, huh?
Unless it's a Remington.
That's accurate. I mean, your statement, not the gun. I'm sure the gun's accurate. Clear.
Let's stick a Bulgarian bayonet on it, because bayonets are cool. That's what 10 years of the federal assault weapons ban taught us. We actually needed bayonets, which we didn't even think before. So yeah, I didn't buy one at the time. To be fair, didn't have a lot of money in 2005. I was in grad school at the time. I did have an SAR-2. I had a couple of Bulgarian kit builds. I let it go. It seemed expensive, and they weren't in stores. They were one of those things you kind of had to special order. So I saw the price, which at the time was about $600, which seemed a lot for a stamped gun, when I paid like $350 for my SAR-2. And then the price went crazy. Now Arsenal would introduce the SLR-107 series in 7.62x39 and the SLR-6 series in 5.56. These would both be stamped guns, and they would kind of quietly discontinue their milled guns for a while, kind of going over to the stamped. But with the SLR-105s gone, yeah, prices went nuts. They went to $1,000, $1,200, even $1,500. And the problem you had to really look for was, at the time, this was when the 7 and 6 ammo was in. It was cheap, it was plentiful, and people, by and large, didn't quite understand the concept of corrosive. So more than a few of these looked really good on the outside and had pretty crummy bores. Thankfully, they were at least chrome lined, so usually, unless it was a really bad case, you could clean one up. And it was hard enough to find a 105, but to find a 105A1, that much more difficult. I learned my lesson, and there were no more 545 Arsenals. The only little blip on the radar was around 2010, 2011. They had the SA-RPK 3, which was their milled RPK, typically with the black furniture, but with the 545 barrel. I considered one of those, didn't pick it up. No, I'm okay with it. It seemed a little odd to me. They were just built in the USA. They weren't imports. And then we get the 104 series.
104FR.
Let's play musical bayonets. So the 104FR is virtually the same as the 105, except of course it has the left side folding stock. Arsenal really likes doing their stamped guns with the folding stock. In fact, the 105 was the only fixed stocker they did up until the SLR-107FR just a few years ago. Now, the first version was not this. It was actually the 104UR, the AK-74U, which I was excited about when those came out. Still love it today because it's an authentic crink in 545. But it is kind of a niche item. Either you need to SBR it or do something. This, when it came out later, was more of a everyman gun. And it came standard with the barrel threads, the bayonet lug. This had the accessory lug for the first time. Standard furniture, and again took a standard buttstock. I will say that to my mind, the 105s were a little bit smoother. And trigger was a little nicer. That's not to kind of trash talk the 104s, but you can tell that when the 105s were out in 2004, 2005, Arsenal was a much smaller company, really trying to make a name for itself. By the time of the 104s, UR or FR, they had made a name for themselves. So I think maybe some of the small details went under the radar, but reliability wise and all that, they're identical. And there's a few very small differences in detailing, but for all intents and purposes, it's the stock, and of course having the reinforcing plate over the trigger. So yeah, these came out and they sold okay. In fact, Arsenal only imported a couple of batches. If you look on the guns, they either have a 2014 or a 2015 trunnion date. I don't recall ever seeing a 2016 date. And that's telling because if the last ones were brought over in 2015, it wasn't until May of 2017 that Arsenal Incorporated in Las Vegas announced that they were discontinuing the 104FR series. Even then, they still had stock left. They just said, look, when the stock's out, it's out. But it took them a couple of years to sell what they had. And that was after reducing the price several times and doing several Black Friday sales and things. They were well-respected guns, but because they were so easily available, people didn't feel a rush to buy them. Plus, people were kind of so-so on 545. And you'll notice that in the American market. There'll be periods in time where 545 is kind of the thing. 2009 comes to mind, and then it'll kind of cool off. Unfortunately, the 104FR came a couple of years too late. If it had come in around 2010, 2011, I think it would have made a bigger splash. Also, by this time, we have the SGL-31s, the Russian guns, and soon we were about to have the Vepr FMs and 74. So we had a couple of Russian 545 alternatives. Plus, we still had quite a few kits from Bulgaria and even Poland in the form of the Tantal. So people had options, and it wasn't until 2013 that Century stopped ordering the the Wasser 2 from Cougar. So this kind of came into a market that was already somewhat full. My point is, it wasn't flooded, but the 545 market is pretty small. So when there's already a couple of options around, it's kind of gets lost in the noise, if you know what I mean. So it didn't sell awesome for Arsenal. Certainly not as well as their 7.62x39 guns. And by this time, they're already kind of getting away from the stamped a bit more and going back to the milled with successes like the SAM-7R and SAM-7SF. So, why do I say these were probably not ever going to come back into the country? Well, a few reasons.
104 you are.
You look so much taller than me when you're up on the step.
You're just not crouching.
It's clear.
Let's throw a 104UR up, just to give you something else. This is something I've said many times, but I find I have to repeat several times too. So again, 545x39 is not popular in Eastern Europe. And then half the time when I say that, people say, but why? And then they talk about ballistics and all this. No. It's politics. 545x39 was thrust upon them, forced on them by the Soviet Union. They didn't necessarily want to adopt it. Some nations actually managed not to. They held out long enough till communism fell apart. Bulgaria, Poland, a few others like East Germany, not so much. Now, Romania seems willing to make it, but only if Century orders it and orders it in large numbers. But Bulgaria was always extremely reluctant, and it almost seems like they were only doing it when they had leftover parts. And even if they didn't, no one else in the world is ordering this caliber outside of, say, Russia, who make their own guns, so they don't need to order from Bulgaria. Everyone else is ordering either 7.62x39 or 5.56, so that's what they're tooled up for. That's what they have barrels for. That's what they have bolt faces for. Why would they tool up to make 5.45 for the American market unless Arsenal Incorporated is willing to order several thousand? And why would Arsenal Incorporated be willing to order several thousand when the last time they did it, it took them a couple of years to sell off the one order? Especially considering every time they order SLR-107s or SAM-7s, they sell out like that. 7.62x39 simply sells so much faster, better, and easier than 5.45. So Arsenal Bulgaria doesn't really like this cartridge. And Arsenal Incorporated, after years of trying to get Bulgaria to build some, finally wore them down in 2013, and they built them, and then they found out they didn't sell as well as they'd hoped, so financially, not a great incentive there either. On top of that, 5.45 mags here are getting more and more expensive as every year goes on, and the 5.45 ammo, the cheap 7 and 6, long gone because the ammo was sanctioned, was banned 10 years ago. And with the status of import, Wolf or Tula or whatever, coming out of Russia, it's kind of a big unknown. Now, they could still have Red Army Standard out of, say, Romania, maybe. But don't look to Poland. Bulgaria might reluctantly make some 5.45 guns if the money's right. Romania certainly will. Poland, hell no. They do not like that cartridge. So, as I said, in 2014, the market was pretty full of 5.45 guns. So they were everywhere, thus people weren't in a huge hurry to buy them. But first, in June of that year, Izhmash, Kalashnikov concern products were sanctioned. So no more Segas, no more SGLs. And so then we had Bolots for a few years, the Vepers. But then they were sanctioned in June of 2017. On top of this, like I said, Century stopped ordering the Wasser 2, so by this time they're drying up. And the parts kits are drying up, especially those that have the original barrels still intact. And US 545 barrels have a mixed bag reputation. So what was once a pretty wide open market really narrowed down. And I think that's why today people are really craving the 104. And the more people talk about it on forums and bid up auctions, the more people see other people are interested in something, then it's just kind of natural that they become interested in it. And that's why a gun that was once $1,000 brand new is now selling for $3,000 used on Gunbroker. And that's, cool it. It's a good gun. It's not a $3,000 gun. That's getting into Swiss and HK territory. Trust me, it's nice. It's not that nice. It really isn't. So those are the kind of the reasons. Financially, it just doesn't make sense. And it was always a bit of a flash in the pan. I think it was always going to be a limited item. It was never meant to be a standard kind of thing, year in, year out. And Russia is really the only country that's happy to make 545 today, and they're all sanctioned up, so that ain't happening. And of course, the ammo is kind of harder to get, and frankly, it's not noticeably, empirically better than 556. Now, people will say this and that, they'll do these comparisons, but usually it's not an apples to apples comparison. They'll take mil-spec 7 and 6, which is 545, and they'll compare it to commercial grade 223, maybe, I don't know, Wolf or what have you. That's obviously the 545 is going to do better. But if you compare military spec 556 to military spec 545, honestly, the performance is so similar that it comes so much more down to the shooter and their skill or their optic or anything else, the phase of the moon. The truth is, they are very, very similar cartridges, yet in America today, well, with the ammo crunch notwithstanding, you have a lot more choices in 556. Match grade, plinking grade, steel, brass. I know there are a few domestic sources for 545, but they're very expensive and relatively low production rates. So realistically, 556 is just the more realistic cartridge to get into 2021. I'm not saying don't get into 545. I'm just saying don't pay $3,000 or up for a 104FR. Also, please quit asking me if I have one to sell. So many people have asked by now. Even if I did, it's gone. Other people have asked. I wish I had a magic time machine. Yeah. But it's not completely hopeless. If you want to get into 545, there are a few options, even now. Baseline, let's run a mag through the SLR-104FR. Alright, now with the Russian mag. Clear. Hey, look, it's back. Anyone who follows my personal channel knows that it did come in a couple of weeks ago. Just waiting to get out and shoot it again. Yes, the Palmetto State, the PSA 74. Like it or not, this is one of the better options for a new production 545 gun. Now, I can't say if it'll shoot, how it'll do. What I can say is they have in fact fixed the stock. It's no longer rattling. They fixed the latch for the gas tube. It's much tighter. So we'll see. We will give it a fair shake. But that is an option. And hopefully they continue to work on it and improve it. Now right now, They do not have chrome-lined barrels. FN has said they're not going to do a chrome-lined 545 barrel. There's just not the money in it to set up for that. So if PSA does a chrome-lined 545 bore, it'll have to be through some other source. And of course they do a fixed stock as well as a folder. So that is an option. And as a pure shooter, especially if you don't mind replacing a few things. By the way, PSA replaced not just the firing pin. According to their memo, they replaced the bolt, they replaced the barrel for some reason, and they replaced the trunnion. But they didn't replace the bolt carrier. It's the same. So kind of odd there, but we'll see how it does. Fair shakes, guys, fair shakes. Start off with the PMag that it came with.
Oh, nope. You got a spent casing in there.
Yep. I thought something felt a little off.
Yep. There's still a live round in the mag. Okay. A little more left there. Oh, interesting.
It's empty. I think the live might have come out. Let's check and see.
It is. It's clear.
Yep. Clear.
Alright.
And with any luck, it won't do that on our second outing. Another potential hope is Kalashnikov USA. Right now they haven't announced a 545 gun, and they have been very slow releasing new models. We're just now on the KR-103 and 7.62x39, but they're kind of the opposite of Palmetto State. Palmetto tends to get a lot of things to market, but maybe the first generation or two needs a little work. Kalashnikov USA tends to be very slow, glacial even, but when they release stuff, it seems to more or less be good to go, and also seems to be to Izhmash specification, AK-74M specification. So we'll see. Last year at SHOT Show, Arsenal did talk about importing some Bulgarian 74 kit builds made by ISD, but I haven't heard anything more of their, what was it, SSD, I don't know, whatever, you know what I mean, SDI, all those things, you know what I mean, that company in Bulgaria. It's been a long day. But I haven't heard anything more about those, so I don't know if that's done, over, not happening, or what. Again, nothing's going to come out of Poland. WBP nor FB are going to do a 545. However, there is talk about some more 545 Galil laces, so that's an option. And it's always possible that Cougar in Romania can produce another run of Wasser 2s. If Century ordered enough of them, they would. So my point is, if you find a good deal on a 104FR, by all means get it. And don't expect more of these to be coming in. It's 4 years ago now that Arsenal said they're done, and so far they've kept their word. And I just don't see economically or politically why they would mess with it. But that doesn't mean go out and spend $4,000 or $5,000 on one, go crazy. But look for an alternative. If you're trying to be budget-minded, a PSA. Or if you're patient, maybe wait to see something else that comes out. Also, there are a lot of Vepr FMs in 545 out there. Even unconverted Sega Hunters in 545 out of Russia. And sometimes you can get those for a really good price. And there's always the good kit build. And until recently, there was the Romanian SAR2 and Wasser 2. Even on the used market, they weren't fetching crazy money, although everything's crazy at the moment. So yeah, since I have been asked a lot lately in the last couple of months about the 104FR, I figured it's time to reiterate. It seems like about once a year, we just need to do it. And I get it, guys. I really like the 545 guns. The thing is, I got this one when they were $950 new. And even though I missed the boat on my 105, the SLR105, I didn't just run out and buy one at $1,500. I waited till I found a nice one for $1,000, which I thought was alright, considering the time. So, yeah. Same thing goes with my SLR-104FR. I bought it when they were new, and people thought paying $700 for a fixed stock or $1,000 for a folder was crazy back then. So there's that. As always, the message is, if you want an import and you can afford it, buy it, save up, buy the import. But if you can't, hey, don't lose sleep over it. They're just guns, guys. I mean, they're great, they're a lot of fun, but they're not worth going into debt over. They really are not. And 545, while it's an interesting cartridge, its future in America is limited, let's say. For practical purposes, 556 or even 7.62x39 have more of a future here. That's just how it is. Again, 545 kind of got popular around 2008, 2009 with the cheap ammo. Kind of waned a little bit and then got popular again kind of recently. But before that time, back when I bought my SLR2, which was 2002, it was a very niche cartridge, and I think that's what we'll mostly see a return to. The only thing I'm really hoping is we don't see any kind of prohibition on the importation of cheap Russian ammo, because if we do that, it's not going to be fun. Yeah, US makers, boutique makers will keep making 545, but if you think 25, 30 cents around is bad, wait till it's 60, 70, a buck around. Yeah, so I hope that doesn't happen. So what do you think, guys? Yeah, feel free to share 74 stories. And no, I do not have a secret stockpile of these. I sincerely wish I did. We could pay off our house. But, no, they're gone, guys. They dried up years ago now. But there are alternatives, so consider those. If you have any questions, feel free to post them and do my best to answer. As always, if you could, like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. And also, if you really want to laugh, we did a comparison video in 2014 of the 104FR and the SLR-31. Like I said, if you want to laugh, I bet you can find it. So with that, I wish you a good day. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.